Okay. All right. So here we are, President EVP. There is shockingly also lots of information here. And so what I'm guessing that will probably how this will move is, first of all, I want you all to feel comfortable to just interrupt when you have a question. You don't need to wait until the end. I want this to feel very practical for you if you're in this role, or if you're just trying to get the information because there's nobody with this role in your PTA yet, whatever it is. Just and I won't be able to see hands raised very often. So maybe if you see hands raised, you can interrupt and help them, or just unmute yourself and we'll just make this a little more casual for this session. We're recording it, of course, so you'll be able to check it out later or share with somebody else if you're here because your president is not here. And what else did I want to share? You all already know me. Actually, I think I never formally introduced myself in this meeting, but I'm Michelle Parker, and my kids have all gone through SFUSD, and actually my youngest is the one I was mentioning at the beginning who just finished her freshman year of college. So I actually don't have anybody in SFUSD right now, but have done this for many years, and I have served as president at both a school site and as the district president. And so hopefully I can answer most of the questions that come up. We'll see. I'm sure there are things that I don't know, and we'll have to find the answers for you and give you later. But that's my quick background. And I've served in a lot of different roles at PTAs and within the district. Other than that, Yvette, do you want to do a quick intro of yourself and like kind of what roles, in case they have questions that you might be specifically able to answer so they know what you've done?
Sure. My name is Yvette Edwards. I am a parent of a rising 5th grader at Sunnyside Elementary and a rising 7th grader at Willie Brown Middle School. Prior to becoming executive vice president here, I served on Sunnyside's PTA board as diversity and inclusion chair. I also helped to form and was a founding member for our African American Parent Affinity Group at Sunnyside. So if you are looking into sort of DEI questions or how affinity groups can form and make sure that they are being well supported under your diversity and inclusion committee at your own school, here as a resource for that as well. And as I guess Michelle noted, I was the executive vice president. My 2-year term is up, so I'm going to stay on for 2nd District as the VP of Outreach. So you definitely might still be hearing from me. We do a lot of outreach in the beginning, trying to connect with units, checking in to see what you need, if you still need officers. So feel free to reach out before then if you have any questions, but I look forward to supporting all of you as well.
Great, thank you. And I just actually got a message from somebody in a different breakout room. They need permission to record their room, and I think I can't do it from right here. I think I need to go back in the main room really quickly. So maybe what I can have you all do while I'm popping over real quickly to let them record their breakout sessions is I'll show you this next slide, and this will give you a little prompt to start putting in this chat. Is think about, as you're heading into the role, how you're feeling and what one or two things you're hoping to learn, and you can put those in the chat, and I'll be right back. How do I go back? Oh,
Can you get Michelle?
I can't figure out how to get back.
Someone else?
I can't get myself back.
You don't have your leave room option on the right-hand side, bottom?
Don't have what?
Your leave room option.
I might look different because let's see, leave. Okay, here I go.
Yeah.
Here I go.
Right in.
Go ahead, Pam.
Sure. I am not entirely new to this role. The president who started off last academic year left in December, and then I stepped into the president role. So I've been able to do it for, half the year. And I would say that based on my experience to date, what I think would be really, really helpful for this group, if it's not already incorporated into your presentation, is to just really underscore the timing of when certain things need to happen, like being on top of things like audits, when you need to start forming your nominating committee and how that works. Definitely, I'm sure you're going to touch on bylaws, but really understanding when you absolutely need to do them, and just really also helping people to understand like how do you set the tone as the leader of the PTSA or the PTA.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you. And some of that, we'll go over some of that. And what I can also refer you back to is that the PTA triage session that we had near the beginning of today. And that had this PTA calendar in it that will tell you exactly when you should do all of those things. And it's created like a checklist. So you can actually add things to it if you want to, but it tells you exactly when you need to form your nominating committee, when those tax forms are due. All of that is listed in there. So if you follow that, you're going to be fine. But setting tone and all of that, we'll talk through all of that. And was there,
Sorry, where did you say that checklist is located?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Where is the checklist located?
So we had it in the PTA triage session. That was the second block of what we did this morning. It's listed in there. And if you weren't here for that, I can provide a link in the chat sometime while we're talking during this session too, and we'll send it out. It'll be in the email follow-up. But we can always go back to it. Like I have those slide decks. So even if we want to go back during this session and I can show that to you live again, we can also do that just to make sure it's really useful. Okay, great. Thanks, Amaya. All right. So I know I missed some of were there any highlights, Yvette, that you wanted to pull together from what I missed while I was out for a couple minutes?
No,
Okay.
we had just started talking. I think it's exactly the same thing: budget, support, president's role, audits, and having a really good sense of an idea of when they should be doing things and what exactly they should be doing.
Okay. All right. Okay.
One more thing.
Yeah.
Sorry. And again, this is just based on my short tenure in the role, is how do you manage expectations? Because there's only so many dollars of income coming in terms of funding, and there are a lot of expenses, right? And so how do you set the tone of, okay, well, this is where we're at in terms of dollars coming in, and you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Thank you. All right. Let's go on. I know that, when you are moving into a role like this, it can feel really overwhelming. And I think one of the things I want to make sure that you know is that you don't have to do this the same way as the person before you did it. Like, some people have a lot of time to do this, and they may have a lot of experience in running organizations, and they're all different, and people bring different talents and skills, and you don't have to do it exactly the same way as the person did it before. There are some basics that you need to cover because it's your responsibility as president, but some people manage to spend hours and hours and hours every week on this role, and other people are lucky to be able to spend a few hours in a week or 2 hours in a week, because that's just all they can manage. And that's okay. Like, you'll be able to do it. And hopefully we can talk through ways that you can prioritize that session we talked about earlier. Like, if you know what the bylaws are and some of your basic, the basic responsibilities and structure and policies you need to follow, those will be good. And then if you set some goals, I'm like, well, let's just choose one goal. Like, we really want to make sure that people feel included, and we're seeing a variety of people show up at our meetings or participating in our work, even if it's not at a meeting, like that's the goal. Like, reduce, just choose fewer things to do. You don't have to do a dozen things. Just do the basics that you have to keep your unit in good standing with the IRS and with state PTA, and then just choose like 1 or 2 goals outside of that can be your focus for the year. Just don't try to overdo it. So what we're going to cover is this, it's kind of broken up into 3 sections. They are, what do presidents do? What's your job as a president? How to get started in your role, and then managing the work of the PTA. And as we're starting to refer to, the reason why we've included executive vice presidents in this training is because they're the person who fills in when the president is unable to perform their duty. So they're like the right-hand person. It's really their main responsibility to support the president, manage the specific areas that are unique to the needs of your PTA. Sometimes executive vice presidents do kind of special projects and things. But if your president is out of town for an extended period or has an emergency that necessitates someone stepping in for a period of time or permanently, then the PTA's work can still continue. And so this executive vice president, or whoever your first vice president might be, would be the person who steps in until, if it's a permanent departure by the president, then the EVP would stand in until there is a replacement elected by the board, because that's the board's job, is to fill all vacant positions, including president. So this is going to be more of an introductory kind of a presentation, because in reality, we should probably do a 3-hour session just for presidents, because there's probably a lot. As you holding all of the work of the organization, you're going to want to know a lot about what other people are doing, even if you're not the person doing it, because it's not your job to do all of that actually, and which we'll talk about in a minute, like what your real job is. But knowing what everybody else needs to do helps you to direct them and support them in doing their work, not doing it for them, but just knowing it. So it could take a lot longer. So we're not going to be able to cover in depth everything, but at least you'll be able to start to list what your outstanding questions are. We'll collect those at the end and try to make sure we have some other trainings and resources for you later to answer the things that you didn't get answered today. So this is not the end. This is just the beginning. But this session, combined with all of the other things we've already talked about in today's training, starting earlier this morning, will be helpful for you to refer to later. Okay. So you're not alone. We're here for you. As you have questions, promise we'll answer your emails and your calls, and we'll do what we can to support you. Reminder, what we went over a little earlier, some basic policies. Your PTA, it's a 501c3. It's a nonprofit charitable organization. It's nonpartisan. Your PTA cannot support candidates, even if they're nonpartisan candidates like school board. You cannot get involved in candidate elections. It's non-commercial, so you're not promoting any particular business over another. And it's non-sectarian, so you're not preferring certain religions, political groups, cultures, ethnicities. There's no prioritizing of any of those. This is an organization that serves all with the purposes of PTA that we've talked about. The bylaws and the standing rules are your GPS. So they will help you know where to go. So many times people's questions can be answered if they go to the bylaws, and that's okay that they don't know. We'll show you where they are and you'll be able to find them in the future. I am curious though, how many of you have seen the bylaws for your unit? Raise your hand or do a check or do something if you know if you've seen your bylaws. You know where they are. You've read even just a tiny piece of them. Okay, a few of you. All right, so this is a really good place to start. So maybe your first item number 1 to do is to find out where your PTA's bylaws are. Ask the outgoing people where they are and to share them with you so you can see when they were last revised, but also just to know what's in them. And the standing rules, as Melissa said, they're part of your bylaws, but they're a section of the bylaws that gets much more into details of specific meeting times and the job descriptions of your committee chairs and things like that. And they can have those can be updated a lot more easily. You can update them at any PTA meeting. The bylaws have more of a process they need to go through. They're more formal. Those are the things that, banks might want to see. And, it's a more formal official document that needs to go through a little bit of a different procedure than your standing rules, because it's the kind of the formal structure of your organization. Like I said, the required officers, for instance, that are required by law if you have a nonprofit organization like this. So those are really good for you to do. Find those. That can be your first job. And then the other presentations from today, like I mentioned. So let's start with what presidents do. It's your job to lead communication. You oversee and coordinate the work of your executive board. Excuse me. You preside over that board and those meetings and the association meetings. And before any materials are sent out, for instance, if your PTA does newsletters or is going to send out flyers, that all of these things have certain messaging. They may have details about events that need to have been approved by the members. You want to make sure that you've approved. Now, there are ways that can feel it can feel weird to say the president has to approve every single little thing that goes out from the PTA. And I think, being a little bit realistic with that, every single email that a board member sends out to the group on your big email group, no, you don't need to do that. But if there's a formal newsletter that's coming from the PTA, what you're going to want to look for is, did we approve all of these activities? Do we know about these? Because your membership needs to approve your calendar. And the reason why they approve your calendar, we'll talk about that, or we have talked about it a little bit earlier, but also talk about it more today, is that the calendar, if your PTA has approved the calendar, then all of the events you have on your calendar are covered by your insurance. But if you just have an event that wasn't scheduled and approved by your membership, it won't be covered by insurance. So if somebody gets hurt during that activity, then your PTA could be liable. So that's why, for instance, you want to have the calendar approved. So, so if a newsletter is going out talking about events, then you're going to want to check, oh, yep, we approve that. Oh, it's talking about this activity, or here's the messaging of, our goals of our PTA. Yep, that's represented. Yep. It's just it's like it's a double check to make sure that it's always better, in your professional environments. I'm sure when you have multiple eyes on something, then you're less likely to miss it. So that's the reason why you just want to have a check on that. I send out the second district PTA newsletters every week, for instance, and people send information to me. I put things in it. And then before I send it out, I always send it to Melissa, our president, and she reads it before I send it out every week. Just to make sure that I didn't get something wrong, that everything was there, it's per policy. It's just that other set of eyes to make sure that we're representing the organization well. Now, if it's something also that is representing the school, the principal needs to look at it too. So if you have a newsletter for your school, you want your principal to get some eyes on it. Also, thanks, Pam. So that is important. Your principal should also see what's going through. And you also are appointing the chairs and committee members for your PTA. I don't know if you know that, because there's an informal way that this can happen sometimes, where committees just form and somebody says, oh, I'll keep using my fall carnival example. It's like, I'll lead the fall carnival. Great. And then you just start doing it. But formally, then, if somebody wanted to do that, to just say, hey, President Washington, Pam, I'd like to lead that carnival. And then I, as president, Pam might say, great, done, and as a point that you're appointed, and you want to, run that through with your executive board, where they officially are ratifying your appointments. So, so-and-so wants to lead our fall carnival, and I'd like to appoint them to chair of that committee. And then your executive board would ratify that so that it's in your minutes, and that it's been approved, and that person, that means that you're also in communication. So the person who's running the fall carnival, they're going to be able to receive how much budget they have, or make requests about how much money that I would like to see in our budget so that I can run this fall carnival. And they're going to have access to whatever resources the PTA does, so that they do something in a way that represents the PTA in a way you want to. Right. You also, as president, serve as ex officio member of all the committees, with exception of the nominating committee. That means you can go to any of the committee meetings. You can participate in any of the committees that your PTA has, because your job is to oversee and make sure that the work your PTA is doing is in line with your goals and values. The only committee you don't serve on is the nominating committee. The president should have nothing to do with the nominating committee. You can suggest that people join it and suggest people to run for office. That's great, but you can't select. There's no hand selecting. The appointment doesn't have to be voted on with firsts and seconds. A ratification, it's a motion, so I move to ratify Pam's appointment of so-and-so for the fall carnival. I second, great, vote, and done. And that way it's in your minutes. Okay. Next, finance. So one thing that we talk about often with our full board is that you all are our fiduciary responsibility. Your you're fiduciaries for your organization, and you have fiduciary responsibility to make sure that you are handling the resources of your organization responsibly, in a way that will build trust with your organization. And so, yes, as president, you are not the treasurer. You don't need to be a certified financial planner. You don't need to be an accountant. You don't need to, those are not required, but it is required that you are familiar with the financial procedures so you can make sure that they're happening the way that they should. So there is a training right now with all the financial officers where they're learning more in detail about what those things are, but they include, and also actually that financial review checklist that we showed in that earlier training at the PTA triage training. If you look through that, that covers a lot of that too, of those financial procedures, which include things like making sure that there are 2 people reviewing your bank statements, making sure that when there are reimbursements made, that you are going to be signing those. You see that listed here, signs payment authorizations. So if so-and-so at the Fall Carnival wants a reimbursement for some food that they're going to be they're ordering to provide at the carnival, then and they want to be reimbursed for it, then you're going to be signing the payment authorization because they'll submit for reimbursement, and then the secretary will say, yep, that's in our minutes that we put this in, that we have a budget for the Fall Carnival, and we release those funds, because that's another vote you do when you pass budget and you have things moving forward, as you have to release the funds. So they would be able to say, yep, I verified in the minutes, that's all approved. And so then you would be signing the payment authorization. So does your secretary, and then you can go ahead and make the payment authorization. So that's something you would need to know. And then if you have cash, if you're getting cash at that Fall Carnival, then you're needing to count the cash. Again, not just one person, and it doesn't go home with them. It is 2 people together counting the cash. We have forms for all of that. If you're counting cash, that's a little less common than it used to be. But that's something that you'll also need to be aware of. And financial procedures also include knowing that there should be financial reports at every single one of your meetings, so that you know where you are in terms of your projected income and your projected expenses. Are you on track? Because your expenses can't go over your income. You have to have the money to pay for what you're going to do. And if things are going more slowly, then you need to help your whole board. This is your whole board, but definitely you should be aware about how these things move along. You also are required to sign contracts. So if anybody, again, Fall Carnival example, was to set up a contract with a vendor to come and provide some kind of an activity at a Fall Carnival, then you're going to look in your PTA insurance guide that you will all be getting in the mail when you get in the fall. There'll be that tells you what things are allowed and what things are not, what are covered under PTA insurance. First of all, is that covered? And then if there's a contract and you can go ahead with that, the PTA president has to sign that. It's not the Fall Carnival leader, and it's not the VP of family engagement. It's you. The president is the person who has to sign the contract. And the other thing is the president cannot be related by blood or marriage or reside in the same household as anybody else who signs a check in your organization. That's just checks and balances. That's making sure that no funny business happens, or that even that there's a perception of it. So even though you might never consider having some funny business where there's financial mismanagement, you wouldn't want people to perceive or make accusations that way because you live with the treasurer. It's just, you want the trust in your organization is so important. You don't want that kind of a perception. So you can't be related by blood or marriage or reside in the same household as other check signers. Are there any questions about that? Because I know finance stuff, people always have questions before I move on to the next area of your responsibilities. Okay. So contracts, I was just starting to touch on this. All of the contracts must be approved by the association before being signed. So that's something that you would bring forward at a meeting. Maybe again, Fall Carnival, they're going to do a committee report in your meeting. And they say, we would like to approve a contract with ABC company who's going to provide chairs and tables for our event. And so that would be something that the membership approves. And then you would be the one who's signing it. And there is another person who will also sign it, but you definitely have to be one of the signers. And this is how it would look. You would just say ABC PTA, so if it was Sherman PTA by, Michelle Parker, president, and then the years. And that's how you designate it when you sign the contract, so that it's clear if anybody goes back to that contract, they knew who signed it and what their role was and what year. Okay. Your other responsibility is to be a collaborator. So you're the official contact and communicator for the PTA. So, so for instance, if the press were to call, like you're the representative, like kind of the spokesperson for your PTA. You're the person who's going to be meeting with the principal regularly, which that could be a whole other conversation about partnering with administration. But I would recommend that you try to get a meeting set up with your principal if you're the president really early in the year, and that you set a regular frequency to that. Some PTAs do that once a month. Some people like every other week. You do what kind of a rhythm works well for you, so that you feel like you're communicating and they know what the PTA is trying to do and you know what they're trying to do, so that you can work together to accomplish the goals of the PTA and support the school community. So that's something that you'll want to do. You want to attend district PTA meetings. So we have general meetings 3 times a year where we do our business, where we're approving our minutes and our financial reports and our budgets and bylaws like we just did. And so as the PTA president, you want to make sure that you're trying to get to those, or if you can't, send somebody in your place, if at all possible. It's not required, but it is really good for you to be able to stay in touch with and connected to the district. You're also responsible for making sure there's an annual report every year. And specifically within that is recording volunteer hours. If you have a historian, they can do all this, but you want to make sure that the district PTA receives an annual report with the number of volunteer hours from your unit. Sometimes people are estimating on those. You can also create a simple form. If you have a historian, they can create a simple form where people just enter in their hours every month or after big activities or programs are finished. And then there just might be other kind of random things that you do that the association has approved that you're going to have some role in. Let's move on to this. This is not your duty as the president, but I want to let you know what the principal is supposed to be doing related to your PTA. Our district PTA meetings remote option. Are you asking if we have them remotely, Nina? If that's what you're asking, yes, we do all of our meetings remotely. We are allowed to do business virtually now. Pre-pandemic, that was not something that was for units anyway. It wasn't as possible. District, we could, but yes, our district PTA meetings are almost always remote. It's just as easier with people all over the city. We did used to do a lot of these kinds of trainings in person, and we might do some of those in the future because it's really nice to connect with each other. But they are currently all virtual. Question on all contracts must be signed by the association all contracts must be approved by the association before being signed. The association is the PTA members, correct? So everybody who has joined your PTA is your membership association. So thank you for asking that. Maybe that's something that I should clarify in the slide language. So your PTA members approve everything you do. You do nothing without their approval. Your board does nothing without their approval. You make recommendations all the time. Like you do a lot of pre-work to say, here's what we think would help us accomplish our goals, but you don't do anything unless they've approved it in terms of like formal action. Of course, you can send an email, a newsletter, things like that, but you can't take action on a contract or a budget or your bylaws or anything without their approval. So a principal is a partner and they have an automatic seat on your board. So you don't have to elect them or invite them or anything like that. They automatically have a seat. Some principals don't realize that. And I have attended a lot of PTA board meetings in the last couple of years where there's never a principal there. And I think that the PTA doesn't realize the principal has an automatic seat or the principal doesn't prioritize it. There's a lot of different versions of that. But you want to make sure when you set up a first meeting with them that they know that they have a voting seat on your board. And their job related to the PTA is to know and uphold the district school district policy. So they're going to be able to help you with things like, how can we use our facility? You know, can I help with translation and interpretation? What other rules might there be about, there's some big questions about funds. Sometimes when PTAs are raising funds and being asked to support some things that normally would be on a school budget. We're actually, by the way, almost finished and have finalized and approved a guide for you all in that we've been working on with SFUSD. And as soon as that is ready, they've been promising it for a little while. They're just doing kind of finishing touches on it. We will send that to you so that if you have any questions about spending funds on school things and how that should work between a PTA and a school site, like if the PTA is giving money to the school site to pay for a certain thing that will be in their budget, it'll answer all of those questions. So hold tight on that. If that's something that you're worried about, you should see that from us fairly soon. My guess is after the district's budget is passed later in June, that we'll be able to get that finalized and out to you. So early on in your time as president. So hopefully you can create a relationship with your principal that is really two-way, them not just reporting you out or making you feel like they're telling you what to do, that it should be a two-way partnership, that there's respect between the two of you. Hopefully you can encourage your principal to discuss any concerns they have very frankly, and you can be the same way with them. As I mentioned in the last slide about communications, they need to approve materials that are going out to your school community before you send them out, just because they're responsible. Like they're the ones who ultimately are responsible for your school. It's not the PTA. They're the ones who are held accountable by the district. So if something goes out that is not in line with school district policy, they're the ones who will get in trouble for it. And so that's why they need to approve materials that go out to the whole school from the PTA. And hopefully it doesn't have to be that laborious. You know, you can send them, you know, how much in advance do you need to see this before it goes out? Maybe it's a day or two, and it's just a simple, quick read through to make sure there's nothing conflicting. You can work that out with them so that it doesn't feel like a huge burden, but still they have eyes on it. They also earn advisor to your nominating committee just automatically. They don't, unless they run and want to be elected as a member of their nominating committee to find the new officers, they are just an advisor. So they're a good person because they might know of families and caregivers and staff who would like to be and be really good at your PTA board that you might not know. And so they can give you advice on people who to reach out to and what they're hoping for in partnerships with PTA board members. All right. So together, the principal and the president are communicating, they're scheduling together. When the PTA is scheduling something at the school site, they're talking with the principal, right? Because they have to manage the facility. So you're coordinating there. Making requests of each other. You're both promoting family engagement and supporting the programs and curriculum and students at your school. Okay, getting started. And I also want to acknowledge we're actually already somehow almost to 1. So I think what I want to do is walk through a little bit of this planning thing. I'll try to go through it a little bit more quickly and then pause and see how people are timing wise, if you want to keep going or if you want to stop. And I can always I can send you this deck actually right away if you want before I send the email, and you can have it for your reference, but we'll do a check-in after I walk through the beginning of this planning. Hope that's okay. And then see how everybody is. Okay. So planning, getting started in your year. And here's the suggestion for you. My suggestion to you is to do a board orientation. So now that you have a new board, or maybe you have parts of a board and it's not fully finished yet, not fully fleshed out, and that's something that your board elect is going to do between now and whenever, over the summer or the first month or 2 of school, that you do a board orientation. I'll explain what I mean by that. And then think about the why for your PTA. What are your goals and purpose of your specific school's PTA? And then decide what you're going to do to accomplish that why, and then who's going to do it and who you want to reach out to be part of this work, and then how you're going to do it. Right. So that I think of in terms of your budget, your fundraising, your volunteers is how you accomplish the what of your work. Okay. So PTA executive board orientation. This could look like it could be a transition meeting with the outgoing board to orient, especially if all of you are really new in your roles, perhaps you set up a meeting with the outgoing board to help you understand all of this. And if you don't need to do that, you can also, all you can find on your own also. It just might be easier if you have an outgoing board who can orient you towards some of this, but you should hold maybe a longer session. You could do a retreat or just do like a 2-hour meeting for your first board meeting and do a bit of an orientation so that everybody's on the same page with their understanding of the PTA. The bylaws, you've heard a million times today already. This is a really helpful roadmap for you in understanding the policies of PTA, what officers you have, when you're supposed to meet, who are your check signers. What do we do if one of our board members stops showing up and like just disappears? Like, what do we do about that? How do we run our nominating process for the new officers? All of those kinds of questions are answered in your bylaws. So go through the bylaws together. You could even assign people like, okay, you have this section, you have this section, you have this section, and have people come and give a summary in your meeting. Maybe that's a way to get through it and nobody has to read the entire thing all at once. Or you could go through it together in that meeting. That's really important. And then if you have people who didn't come to today, they may not know what the purpose of PTA is. They just know it's like that kind of generic parent organization. So understanding about the focus and how it's anchored in supporting students and helping them reach their potential, and that that it's an advocacy organization and it's a 501c3 and that you're networked to all these other PTAs in the city, that's going to be really helpful for your whole board to know what their resources are. So the other thing is the insurance guide that we mentioned earlier. Also, it gives you this great list of, they kind of group it in red light, yellow light, green light. Of red light, you can never do these things. They are never covered by your insurance. Yellow light, they're okay if, you know, you get certain things signed, or there's certain specificity in how you run that activity that will allow it to be covered. And then green light are like, these are always just fine. And then, so there's some guidance in that book. It will come to you closer to the school year. You'll get it in the mail. You can also access it online. Once you can go, you can find it online. And one thing that Melissa mentioned in her part was this website called leaders.capta.org. If you go there and you enter in your units number, which is on the front page of your bylaws, you can get in kind of the behind the scenes, like a leader site for PTA, and you'll be able to find a lot of that there. And there are also links in these decks. Again, like we've been really careful to put a lot of information in the notes pages so that you can find the links to everything we're referring to. The last thing I've listed here in the square, the transition procedure book. In the olden days, before we had all of these like digital files, people would actually put a binder together called a procedure book. And so you can do virtual versions of that, which is just like, what is your job? What's been happening in this PTA? What is a good calendar of how to do this particular thing? If you're a treasurer, like what things do you need to do and when do you need to do them? When is the last annual financial report? What is, you know, all of those things in one place. And so in a way, it's just a good file structure. At the minimum, it's a transition meeting. This, like we're just talking about here, this orientation or having the outgoing board and the incoming board meeting together. You should, if at all possible, try to meet with your outgoing president to get some tips and advice from them. So the why, as you're planning, is getting started in your year, is refreshing people's mission and purpose, understanding what that is, finding out what the specific needs of your school community are, figuring out who your partners are in this, the administrators, the staff. Maybe you have some close community organizations who work with your school, working with all them. And then after you understand that, then you're going to define your own PTA's vision and set some SMART goals. And by SMART, we mean specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, or relevant. Sometimes R is relevant, and time bound. So not just we want everybody to be happy, but you know, we want our students to feel supported. You know, X percentage of our students are going to feel this way, you know, in this amount of time. You know, that's way too vague of an example, but SMART just means you get specific about what you're trying to do and you have a way to measure whether or not you've met that goal. And you want to make sure it's a realistic goal to meet, just not like world peace, right? So, so you'll want to do that together as you're planning. The what is these family like engagement and programs. So members need to approve any programs you're going to run in your PTA that are going to advance those goals, and that PTA calendar that I mentioned to you before. That is just a list of activities you want to do. It's going to include your meetings. It's going to include if you're gonna do that fall carnival, maybe you're gonna have, if you're in high school, maybe you're gonna do college application information night for families so that they know how to support their kids who are gonna apply to college. Maybe it's going to be a community beautification day where you're going to all come and like weed the gardens and, you know, do some things to make the area nice. Whatever that is, put it in your PTA calendar. You can amend that throughout the year. So it doesn't have to be perfect by your first PTA meeting in September. You can start putting it together, but as more opportunities come along during the year, just amend it, just add it to the calendar and vote on it. Just stick it on your agenda and you'll be fine. This 3-to-1 guideline. So this is it's suggested that you have at least 3 community building events for every 1 fundraiser. The reason why there is that guidance is because some PTAs can fall into the trap of we just fundraise, that's all we do. And then they sort of lose their purpose. They become a fundraising machine when that's not, like, yes, it's a thing the PTAs do, but it's not the main purpose. The main purpose is to support students in being successful, reaching their potential, you know, supporting families, all of that. And yes, you need money to do that. That's why you raise the money, but it's not you don't only exist to raise money. So if you're building relationships and community and spending a little more time doing that, and then doing the advocacy to try to help the district and the state fund education, then hopefully that's, you know, that's kind of an ideal. All right. Let's move on. So the who. So this is your membership. So all of our work is to benefit children and youth in our schools, and we do the work with our PTA members. Again, anybody can join our PTA who make every decision. But I want you, maybe here's something you can do with your PTA membership. Go find out how many members you had last year in your PTA and consider your school size. So maybe you're one of our schools who had 15 or 17 members. Not very many members, especially if you're a school of like 400 students. So look at the school size, look at the members, see if that feels like there's some room and opportunity there. Also consider maybe you're an elementary school, which tends to have a lot more families engaged than a middle school and high school does. And so you can set some kind of a realistic goal. So look at all of that, get that data, then set a goal for this year and then break it up into a year-long campaign. So you're probably, if you go hard at the beginning, you're going to get 80 to 90% of your members in that first month or two. And then the rest might trickle in over the year as as they remember, they just didn't get to it, or they understand the value of the PTA. They might join later. So, and have some kind of a regular request campaign throughout the entire year, keep it going. And then you want to share the value proposition of your PTA. Like, why does it matter being part of the PTA? What does it do? What does doing membership do? Well, there's a lot more voices, you know, advocating for a certain thing that gives us more power. There's all those member perks. There's, you know, ways where we're united in voice, the programs that we're helping. Thanks, Alicia. I know we're hitting 1 o'clock, so we're going to probably have to stop soon too, but thanks for coming. So that's what I would do with the membership. And then the how, let me touch this, and then we're going to do a check-in with each other before we move it forward anymore because of what time it is. The how is the budget, fundraising, and volunteers. So the budget, your treasurer chairs your budget committee. And how you form the budget, they might look at last year's budget and just to kind of do an initial draft of here's what we did last year. I'm going to put this in a draft. You can also have your board submit items, committee chair submit items. You know, this is what we think we're going to want to do this year and spend money on. And then you're going to have your treasurer and your budget committee make sure that the income and expenses are not out of whack. Maybe you had some unspent funds last year. That's okay. You can use them again, but be careful that you're not taking on things that have to be paid for every year with money that was only available for 1 year. You know, if you have kind of an average amount you're able to raise, then that's probably a safe place to put your expense total in. You'll want to have the preliminary budget and then bring that hopefully to your first membership meeting in the year for them to approve, because you need them to approve the budget before you can spend any money. So they're going to approve that budget. You'll have a motion to approve the budget, and then you can release funds for, if you have some money in your account already, you can release funds for the initial things that are going to happen in your year. I wouldn't release more funds to be spent, definitely more than you have income for, but I probably wouldn't do it above beyond your first semester so that you're okay there and covered and can pay your bills. Fundraising is a way that you can get these programs on. You want to be guided by the programs and activities that your members have approved. And then volunteers, there's a breakout session happening right now that's focused on some volunteer recruitment. And so we'll send you that link with some good ideas on how to recruit volunteers if that's a challenge that you have in your PTA. There is there's an opportunity to include more people when you're recruiting volunteers too, so that it doesn't feel like just the same people over and over, that you're looking for, you know, a group of people, volunteers who are representative of your school. So there's opportunities there to promote inclusion. And also some of the advice I would give is to break your asks into small chunks. Some people get overwhelmed by the idea, for instance, of being an officer. Like, that's so much work, that's so much time. But if you say, can you just show up on Saturday for 2 hours while we clean up the yard at the school, like, that's a much easier thing to say yes to. Or, hey, could you just coordinate the volunteers for this family math night? Like, that's a little bit easier than it is to do something bigger. So just start small, be specific so people know what's expected of them. And then, okay, and I'm going to pause for a second. And I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen because I just want to see all of you who are still left. Because I know we lost at least one. How are you all on time? Do you want to keep going? This is the third section. I can either go through it, or we can stop and I'll just send it to you and you can read through it and ask us if you have questions. Or we can just pause and take some questions now and not go through any more of the deck, and you can just look at it later. I just want to be respectful of people's time.
I find this all to be great information. I mean, I'm willing to stay longer if other people in the group are as well.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm gonna need to jump off, but feel free, obviously, to keep going, and I'll look at the deck.
Okay, and there'll be a recording too. You can always look at the recording later to hear the conversation. Okay, well, we'll just keep going. For the people who have to leave in a minute, do you have any questions that you want us to answer before you go? Okay, cool. All right. Yes, go ahead and take a bathroom break. The question, how do we distinguish the difference between things we vote on as board members and things that the PTA families vote on? So anything you're voting on as a board you're voting on a recommendation to the members, because the members make all the decisions. So if your board is making a recommendation, like let's say that they've reviewed the budget, and the board is going to move that forward to the membership, then they have voted on saying, like, we like this budget, we're going to recommend that the members approve it. So it's going to go to the members. That's like your motion is the executive board, and then there'll be a second, and then there'll be discussion about the budget, and then the members approve it. So that's an example. Let's say that your PTA wants to start a reflections program, which is the student art program. So the board might talk about it and have a proposal, and they've identified somebody to be a reflections chair who's going to lead that program. They're going to say, this all sounds really great, we want to do this. And so they'll have a short proposal. This is what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to involve students and families in this reflections art program. And then they say, this is our recommendation. We're going to vote that we want to do this, but it's just a recommendation. The board is voting on recommendations. They are never voting on action for the whole membership. They're just voting on a recommendation. Does that feel clear? Okay. Cool. All right, let me go back to sharing my screen and we'll just keep going. There it is. Like, where did it go? Okay, managing the work. Okay, so I like to think of a PTA president as like the ultimate project manager, or is it the analogy I gave before about a conductor, an orchestra conductor, or an air traffic controller? It is not intended that you are doing all of the work. You will burn yourself out. Do not do all of the work, but you want to be a good project manager, which means that you want to be clear about what your goals are. You want to have a clear plan together where you're preparing your meetings, where you are knowing all the pieces and how they fit together, like understanding what a secretary does and what good minutes are, what a parliamentarian does. Understanding those things help you to direct the traffic, and say, and here's our year, and here's how we're going to map it out. And like I said, we have that calendar for you that will help you. We hopefully have a lot of tools that will help you be a really good project manager, but it is delegating work. You are not doing all the work. You should not do all the work. And if you are in a small PTA, small board, do fewer things. Don't do all the things just with few people or just you. Do fewer things so that you don't burn out. Thank you, Amaya. So that is a huge, I think a really important piece of advice is think of yourself in that way, not the doer of everything, but the project manager, conductor, air traffic controller. Okay, let's talk a little bit about meetings. So what happens in your meetings is like, so this is, we talked about this today in the, a couple sessions ago, this morning, facilitating effective meetings. That purpose, doing your preparation on your agendas and notice, delegating to people to be part of the meetings and have presentations, your process, like your parliamentary procedure to make sure there's room for people to talk about and vote on the things that your PTA is going to do. You're trying to include and invite and involve people in your meetings and you're following up. And what happens in your meetings is like, finishing the blueprints for your house. So you've already started the blueprints because you have your mission, your vision, and your goals, and you've been built, and then you're building the frame. And so this is that's done because you have already those mission, vision, goals, and things like that. All right. You blueprints and frame. And then when the decisions are recommended and made in the meetings, I'm sorry, let me back up. You're building the frame when you make the decisions. So you have the blueprints because you have your mission, vision, goals. You're building the frame when you're making the decisions at your meetings, because like that's where you're going to hang everything on. So in between meetings, when you're doing the work that was the result of the actions and decisions you've made, you're hanging the drywall, you're installing the windows, you're painting the walls. All of that is because you made the good house frame with those decisions in your meetings. And then now people go and do the work that those decisions, that frame allowed you to do. Okay. Now, your committee meetings, these are open to the president, your chair, your committee members. These are the different types of meetings you have. You're going to want to meet as necessary. A quorum for a committee meeting is just a majority of committee members. This is the place where you're going to have lengthy discussions. Like this is like the preliminary work. You're working out the details. Like, again, let's use our fall carnival example. This is the committee that's going to sit together and say, what do we want to accomplish? How many booths do we want to have? Who do we want to have involved? Are we going to charge any fees for tickets? Are we going to invite any community organizations to host booths for us? Are we going to have really active things, or what are we going to do? Right? Like that's the lengthy discussion that takes place in a committee meeting. That committee is going to recommend actions to the executive board, including like, is this date okay? We want to choose this date for our fall carnival. And then after that, the executive board is going to say, great, this, that sounds great. We're going to approve those. We think that those dates are fine. And now you're going, as a committee, take that whole action in a committee report to the association, to your members. And they are going to say, yes, do the fall carnival. That budget sounds good. Let's authorize those expenses. Done, right? So they're doing lots and lots of work behind the scenes to get ready for that. Sometimes you're in a small PTA, you might not have a lot of committees. And so some of this might happen in the executive board because there just isn't a committee. But this is a good kind of scope of work for committee members. Committee chairs are appointed by the president. They're ratified by the executive board. So again, in that example, hey, I'd like to run the fall carnival. Great. I'd like to appoint you there. So I'm going to bring that to my executive board, who then ratifies that. So president, I want to appoint so-and-so to run the fall carnival. The board votes then to say, yes, we approve. Let's go ahead and appoint so-and-so to run the fall carnival. There's a lot of different kinds of committees you can have related to the programs you're running, fundraising, membership, finance, hospitality, all those kind of welcome events that people might do at the beginning of the year, family engagement. You have specific events committees, maybe you have a communications committee, so you have people who are running social media or doing the newsletter, or who maybe are updating your logo, things like that. Your executive board meetings are open to all of your elected and appointed officers. And your standing committee chairs. So a standing committee, if you don't know this, there's standing committees and ad hoc committees. Standing committees are the committees that are always there all year long. They're listed in your bylaws. So that might be like your finance committee, that might be an events committee, it might be your hospitality committee, because they're just always there. An ad hoc committee, an ad hoc committee chair does not sit on your executive board. The ad hoc committee might be, we're going to form a committee to look into this particular thing. Like we have received a donation from this particular family trust, you know, and it has to be used in this sort of a way. It aligns with our PTA purposes. Our PTA has decided to accept this because it aligns with our purposes of the PTA. This committee is going to research how they might like to, some ways that we might recommend that the money is spent. And so maybe that is a committee that's just going to exist for 2 months, you know, to work on that. And then they're going to bring a recommendation to the membership on how to spend that money, that donation, and then they're done. Like they're over. It's just a short-term committee. That is not the kind of committee chair that sits on your executive board. Your executive board also has your teacher representative. There is one that is automatically on yours. You can have the teachers choose how they want to choose that person, or you could have multiple representatives, a student representative, the principal. All of the members of your board must be members of the association too. You can have guests come to your committee. Maybe they have a presentation to make. They can have a courtesy seat to share information. Maybe there's a program you want to bring into your school. Maybe it's a safety program. And so you'd have somebody come and present. So they come in, they don't have voting rights, and then they leave after they give their report. They don't stay for the entire meeting. You're going to want to meet monthly. This is in your bylaws that you should meet monthly, even if your members only meet maybe 4 times a year. You're still meeting monthly as an executive board, and you want that to be at least 14 days before your member meeting. That's because if you're going to make any recommendations, you want to make sure that those get in the agenda. That there's notice about those actions that you're asking the members to take. That's why you want to do it ahead of time and not just like 5 minutes before. Your board also elects people to fill vacancies. They appoint chairs, as I said. They review the budget, financial review, all of those things. I think you're getting the idea, is that they are reviewing, making recommendations. They're not taking formal action for the organization. And I want to, this might be something you don't know. So there are these elected and appointed positions on your board. Your bylaws will tell you what positions you have in your PTA. The elected positions are these that I have listed: the president, executive vice president, vice presidents, and some people have many. We have many on our district board. You might have a vice president of DEI, vice president of communications, vice president of events. Like, people have different ones. You just write it in your bylaws to update it to the ones you want, depending on how many people you think you can have, and you have availability of people to do these roles. Secretary, treasurer, financial secretary, financial reviewer, formerly known as the auditor, and the historian. So those are all elected roles. President, secretary, and treasurer are required by nonprofit law, and you must have those filled. So you don't have to have any of the other officers if you don't want to, but you have to have at least those 3. So small PTAs or PTAs who are in transition, and if a lot of people leave, sometimes they have a very, very small board. You can also adjust your bylaws in case, like if you're having a hard time meeting quorum, you might want to adjust your bylaws to not have all those officers if they're not actually filled positions, so that it's easier for you to meet quorum and take votes. So that's a thing to consider if that's a thing you're struggling with. The positions that are appointed by the president and then ratified by the board are the parliamentarian, the corresponding secretary, and the standing committee chairs. The principal and the teacher rep don't need to be elected or appointed. Like, they're just automatically part of your board. Again, ask the teachers to figure out how they want to choose the person who's the rep, but it's not part of you don't run an election or appointment process for that. It's kind of built in. Okay, working together, the things that you're going to be doing together are running and managing your PTA. So you're going to be paying bills, making sure that gets done, creating committees and filling vacancies, communicating and collaborating by participating in the meetings, presenting reports to the board, but also to the association, to the members, as you have recommendations. And then this, as I mentioned earlier, is really, really important, is protecting your PTA's assets. Being financially responsible, you have a fiduciary responsibility to protect the assets of the organization. So you need to review and understand financial reports and pay attention to the balance between expenses and revenue, and use best practices that are all listed on the website. They're easy to find. If you can't find them, I'm happy to direct you to them. But this is really important. If you're a PTA, or if this is just not something you know a lot about and you feel a little inadequate, that's okay. You could have a speaker come in to your executive board. Maybe your treasurer is actually really good at this and does it professionally. They could come in and train you, or we can also set up a training where the district PTA comes in and trains your board on this. So like the training that's happening right now for financial officers, we could come and do it for your whole board. You just tell us and we're happy to set up a time to do that if it feels like an area you're just a little less comfortable with. No big deal to be uncomfortable with it. These are some required reports that you have to form, you have to file. There's a conflict of interest form you'll want to have everybody fill. This is available on the California website, California PTA website, to make sure that there's no conflict of interest in the votes and financial things that you are doing as an organization. You want your whole board to sign that. The IRS requires a Form 990. You're not going to owe money on it, but you do need to file the report. And then there's a 199, the Secretary of State requires. The N is listed if you don't have a lot of revenue. It's more of a postcard version. It's not a big huge document. That's what that is related to. And then there's another form that's required by the Attorney General. And then workers' comp form is something that we need all of the PTAs to fill out in case you're paying people. But even if you're not paying any people through your PTA, you still have to write, we're not paying any people. We don't, so you're not paying workers' comp insurance on anybody. That's what those are required. And I know you probably have more questions about some of those, but we can provide more information later about that. Let's see, I think we're very, very close to being done here. So here's just a couple pages of tips here. One is on communication. It's easy, I find, when you're busy, when you're really busy and feeling a little overwhelmed, it's easy to get worse at communication. So find a rhythm where you're regularly and meaningfully communicating with your board, especially two-way. So you're not just pushing out information, but you're providing a way for them to talk to you. So meetings are, of course, a great way to do that, but it may be that there's just very quick updates. Maybe you start a Slack channel, whatever it is that you do, have really regular, meaningful communication with the people you're working with to try to keep people in the loop. It is something that takes time, and it is so worth it to take the time to do. It prevents a lot of headaches down the road if you find a way to make that a regular part of your job. Think of communication as one of your most important things to do. As I mentioned earlier, I have in my job, I manage a department of about 20 people, and I find that this is like a major part of my job, right? Is aligning people together, getting everybody on the same page, communication with my boss who is, in the C-suite, and then also all the people on my team. And so it's hugely important, and it really builds trust and in what you're doing. And it's really helpful for avoiding some headaches later. Let's see. Abby says, are there PTAs that have successfully set up Slack, whether for their board or their general membership? I'd love to be in touch about how they've done that. I don't know. Actually, that's a question that you could put in the PTA listserv once we get those set up. I've been part of setting up Slacks for volunteer groups, not necessarily paid memberships. And so I could probably help you out with that too. But I don't know if there are other PTAs who've done it. I love Slack. I use it for work all the time. I find it really, really useful, but any communication platform is only as useful as people use it. So if your board is like, yeah, let's do that, then totally explore it. But if a lot of people on the board have never used it and do not want to learn a new thing, don't use it. Use something else, so whatever people will use is what will work best.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's one tip I have for that. So, and then I like this communication pledge I wanted to share, which is try to use this approach with folks is tell me first, tell me in a language I understand, tell me as soon as it is concerned, tell me privately, and give me time to think before we conclude, so that you can, again, build trust, avoid people who gossiping, avoid people harboring things that they feel really badly about, that if they brought it up earlier, you could actually address and resolve. So I like this pledge. Question here on any thoughts on how EVPs and VPs can best contribute and the differences with the president role. VPs can be really different because sometimes VPs act as committee chairs, but the executive vice president, I think, is supporting a lot of this, knowing how this works so they can step in if the president needs to. But I find executive vice presidents are often taking special projects. They're supporting all this work that I'm talking about, like a right-hand person for the president, and really helping the president make all this happen, but also taking on special projects. I wonder, Yvette, if you're still there, do you want to weigh in your opinion on this?
I am still here, but I just had a kid who came up to me. What was it?
The question is, any thoughts on how EVPs and VPs can best contribute? And I answered the VP question, but for an executive vice president, what are the differences with the president role, and how can you best contribute as an EVP?
I think you can best contribute by trying to stay in communication with your president. I think that obviously just offering up any additional supports that are needed. There were a lot of times where, you know, I attended meetings for Melissa, whether it was conventions or other events. So just really being communicative and having that constant communication so that your president doesn't get overwhelmed, I think is helpful. And yeah, it's another great way to also really help someone understand the president role in the event that once you leave, they might be interested in sort of filling that role. So I think that's probably the best thing that an EVP can be there for. And then just really making sure you're staying in constant communication with them to not let yourself become overwhelmed or feel stressed out, because we need our presidents to be really just in a very good place. There are a lot of personalities, as Michelle mentioned in the previous session, that you will end up having to balance and try to make happy. And so just making sure that you lean on your EVP as much as you can to really allow yourself to be in that place that keeps you going.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that that Yvette has helped a lot with this term has been we started this doing kind of wellness checks with all of our PTAs to see what do you need, because we're in a different position than you. Of course, we're supporting like 60 right now, 62, almost 64 units, and so we created this this sheet to kind of track what some needs were. And so she was has been really helpful in leading that, connecting with people, seeing what support they need. And so there are ways that in some ways your executive vice president can be an extension of the president to help those things. Like the president really wants to know what's happening, what people's needs are, and, whatever, but it's like they extend their capacity. The EVP can really help reach more people and support more people as an extension of the presidential role in some ways, I think.
I think that's a really good point, because I think if you can use your EVP as a sort of bridgeway between you and maybe even the committees, it can be helpful. Obviously, you ultimately have to be the official sign-off person, so that is a major difference with the role. I can't sign anything. I'm not able to send out those newsletters or approve them in the same way as the president can. But if you have a very good active EVP, they can help you sort of navigate a lot of your committees to make sure that when things get to you, it's not either too late or that it's enough to get to you to really be able to provide the proper guidance and finish it up. So.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The other thing that I would add that I think would be really helpful with an EVP is just as a thought partner. Sometimes when you're president, you're just like, I need to think through this with somebody before I bring it to the board. I just need to talk through this. Like I have this idea, or I'm really frustrated. I don't know how to handle this. And you just need somebody to talk through with it. Call your EVP, or you as an EVP, because I see that is your title. You're the VP, incoming VP. Reach out to your president and say, hey, I'm thinking about this. Do you want to think through this? Like, let's talk through this. And, I'm noticing this, like bring stuff up to them and say, I think this might be really helpful. Like you have because they have so many things on their plate that you being slightly removed from all those things might be able to identify something that strategically could be really valuable and useful. So bring it up to them and offer to be let me be your thought partner on some of this before we bring it to the board. That's what I would say.
Super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, good. I think this is the last tip slide, and that is team building. This is find a way early in the year to build some teamness to your group. I have found not many PTAs that I've been a part of have been able to do some sort of a retreat. And by retreat, I mean just a few hours together where you can just do some strategy. You can think about goals and start doing some work that you can then bring to the membership later. It's really nice to do that because you can also build in some time for people to get to know each other as people, eat some food together, do things like that. I think can help. The other thing you want to think about now is starting to find your replacement from your first day as president. Is who might want to do this next? How can I start to mentor and give people opportunities to lead so that they can get a taste of it? And they might be willing to be on the board or be president later in the future. And you're just starting to lay the groundwork for them. So I think that's a really important thing you can do as part of the team building, but also kind of mentoring and building capacity. It's because we are PTA supporting kids and, people, everybody's allowed to do that and should be allowed to do that, to participate in that if they've got kids in the school and are part of the school community, but it also means it's a ton of different personalities. And so, push yourself to appreciate different work styles and different ways of doing things and recognize that your way isn't the only way, and find ways to, proactively appreciate what other people are bringing to the work that can make it better. I find if I'm feeling frustrated, but can do that it makes it a lot easier. Like, okay, I got to remind myself I'm frustrated by this, but man, they're really good at this. And this is just a different style. And I can learn from this because there's not only one way to do things. So that's something you can do. Delegate, say thank you a lot. When people feel appreciated, they're more likely to come back and help again. So find opportunities to say thank you. And then this final reminder is don't do this by yourself. You are part of a much larger team on your board, in your PTA, and also here, at the district PTA, you don't have to go it alone. So I'm going to stop sharing that and see if there are any final questions before we close. I know everybody's ready to go. It's longer than you thought, but I appreciate that you all stuck around. There are any final questions you want to ask?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I was parliamentarian this past year, so I got some good opportunity with bylaws, but coming in as president at Wallenberg, and we have a very small community. I think I said that in the comments. We had our board went down to 4, our exec board plus teacher rep, and occasionally the principal. And our general meetings were maybe 11. We beat the bushes to get enough people at least to vote for the elections. And I am president because nobody else volunteered, which I'm sure is the case with most folks. But with communication, you said the principal must approve everything that's communicated. What we have done in the past year, what our current president has been doing is she reaches out to people via Totem, which is just our list, but any general emails have to be sent by the principal. Is that a rule?
That she's reaching out individually to people through Totem?
No. So when we send like the reminders for meetings, those go to the membership via Totem. But then if we want anything to go out to the general school population, that is only going through the principal.
I think that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. Yeah.
Is that a rule, or is the PTA allowed to reach out to the general school population?
The PTA should not reach out to the general school population without the principal's approval.
Okay. So the principal should be sending those emails then.
They don't have to send them, but they should approve them.
Okay. But so what we have had is that the only way we've been is to wait and then our principal is fantastic and completely overwhelmed. So, it takes like multiple reminders, going into her office, crafting the email, and then having her send it. And she usually sends it as an attachment. So it just comes embedded in an email so people don't actually see it.
Yep.
So
yeah, man,
that's one of
the worst. Attachments are the worst. Like when you can refrain from sending attachments. Yeah. Oh,
so I guess that's my question is my understanding was that was a regulation that it had to go from the principal's email.
What I don't know actually though, Ramona, is that it could be that your school or the district might have a policy about that, but the PTA doesn't. The PTA, so if the principal will allow you to send something to the school and gives you access to that list, then you can do it as long as they approve the message that you're sending. Fine. Okay. Yeah, that's it. But there may be there are questions always about lists and approval because contact information, it's personal information. And so if you have an access to an entire list of the school and they didn't approve for the PTA president to have access to the list.
That might be the case.
That might be what's happening. And in which case it sounds like you're doing the best you can do, which is like ghost write an email for them, that they just, all they have to do is send it out and request that it's not an attachment, but it's actually like the body of the email.
Yeah. I think that's where we are. That's my hope for next year is that we can do it at least that way.
Yeah. You could also start building some kind of an email list, that is like people opt into that you can send out that's independent, that's owned by the PTA, but is to everybody who wants to join it. Because obviously I tend to lean towards the side of inclusion, like we're supposed to not have anybody who's not a member vote or whatever. I'm like, the only time that I really think it's necessary to check is when it's controversial, And so like you need quorum, but if you don't have a controversial vote, then why would you say, I need to see everybody's membership card before we do this vote? But it's going to be unanimous anyway. It just feels exclusive. But instead, if you can just invite people to join and say, here's the benefit of being part of the PTA, and you can't be an officer or a leader in the PTA unless you're a member, and that there's ways to be inclusive and not,
exclusive. Yeah, no, I think that's been an issue, because the other thing we were told is that we can't, but I think it was that our teacher rep said that teachers can't give kids things to take home if we wanted to do a paper reach. So I wasn't sure.
School policy, that's not a PTA policy. That could be a school policy. So you could clarify that with your principal.
Okay.
Any other questions before we close? You're probably all starving for lunch. Thank you so much for making all this time to spend with us this morning. I admire and appreciate your dedication the day after school gets out to be here. We'll send out all of the information by Monday at the latest. If it's up earlier, I'll send it out earlier, but it takes a little bit of time to upload all the videos and stuff. So but we'll get it out soon. Thank you, everybody. And thank you for volunteering to serve in your PTAs.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. And thanks, Yvette, for putting on this wonderful session. I really appreciate it.
Thank
Good.
you. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right. We'll see you all later.
Have a good summer.
Thank you.
You too.
Thank you.